I see my name in shining lights. Yeah, a different city every night. Oh, I swear the world better prepare for when I'm a billionaire.
It's time to get down to business on the weekend's #1 business program. Known as the King of Networking, your host, Shalom Klein, has worked with thousands of entrepreneurs and created countless jobs. So, to success. Let's get down to business.
And indeed, we're all about small business jobs and entrepreneurship and business. We talk a lot about business here. You're on with Get Down to Business, and I'm your host, Shalom Klein. Remember, you can always download podcasts from Get Down to Business on my website at shalomklein.com. And while you are there, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Shalom Klein. It's going to be a jam-packed week of content and information you will not want to miss. So let's jump right in. I'm so excited to be joined by Arthur Woods. And Arthur is a social entrepreneur and LGBTQ plus advocate working at the intersection of equity, inclusion, and technology. On top of all that, he's an Amazon national best-selling author of the book Hiring for Diversity and the co-founder of Matheson, a venture-backed technology platform equipping employers with everything they need to manage their diversity hiring efforts. We're going to talk all about it. Arthur was named to Forbes 30 under 30 and 40 under 40. 40 under 40. Lots of great lists over there, lots of accolades. Arthur Woods, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. So, we're airing this episode on June 19th, on Juneteenth, in Pride Month, and certainly diversity, equity, inclusion are all things top of mind right now. And technology is something that's always top of mind in this program. Again, all about small business jobs and entrepreneurship. So I'd love to get to know the person behind the microphone, the social entrepreneur, the advocate. How did you become so passionate about this work?
Sure, Shalom. Well, a couple things. I grew up in a rural town in Northern California, single parent family. It was a very conservative community, and I discovered that I was gay halfway through college, and I never felt like I fit in. I entered my very first corporate job, and when I overheard one of the interviewers use a homophobic slur, it caused me to think, wow, I must be a different person at work than I am at home. And for years, that's the way that I operated. Work was a place that I conformed to be a professional. I could be my full identity, my full authentic self outside of work. And the more that I thought about that, and I realized that we truly these days are spending the majority of our waking lives in our occupations and what we do. And not only should our organizations reflect the values of what we stand for, but our organizations really ought to be places where people feel celebrated for their identities. And so that really led me to a whole new career path of starting LGBTQ focused organizations, getting into HR technology, realizing that we can create inclusive, equitable workplaces through technology these days. To your point, technology is really a potential conduit for this work. So that's really, Shalom, what's gotten me into this work and kept me on this journey all along.
That is fantastic. Thank you for sharing your passion, your inspiration, which is truly inspiring. I'm grateful for it. So I do want to mention again the book that you wrote, Hiring for Diversity. I love that title, which is great. So how can companies reduce bias in hiring?
Yes, well, as you said earlier, diversity, equity, inclusion has gone from what felt like maybe an elective procedure or a nice to have to really an essential imperative more than ever this last 2 years. And one of the things that's been holding the work back that we discovered in our research and our work was that we look at the hiring process and the number of decisions that are made every day in the hiring process. And it's really sort of riddled with bias because we usually are operating in a very quick pace. We're typically operating in an unstructured and improv way. And we introduce so much risk of bias by making gut decisions that are typically very subjective. So the best way that organizations can reduce that bias is by slowing down, by investing in a structured process that's consistent for all candidates, and by training every single person that touches the hiring process, whether it's a recruiter or it's a frontline manager. in unconscious bias and how to take a more equitable and structured approach. So we've actually built technology that helps organizations reduce bias at every stage of the process, from how they write job descriptions to how they interview and how they screen candidates in a more equitable way. The best thing that we can do, though, is to slow down and really sort of educate our teams on the need.
That's fantastic. So definitely, again, looking at that, and so you deal with a lot of companies. You've again, with all those accolades, you've worked with a lot of businesses across the country and probably around the world. What are some of the biggest problems that you're seeing in most companies' diversity hiring efforts?
Well, one of the biggest issues is that companies have oftentimes a very narrow definition of diversity itself. And we found in a recent analysis that the vast majority of companies not only define diversity in a narrow way, but they don't even give a whole cross-section of underrepresented job-seeking communities the ability to self-identify and even acknowledge their existence in the hiring process. So we have really shared with companies the best thing that we can do right now is educate our teams on a holistic definition of diversity that spans, everything from the disability community, the LGBTQ community, the refugee and immigrant community, many communities that aren't typically on the radar every day, and actually give job seekers the ability to anonymously and safely identify that they themselves are in these communities. And that opens up a whole new opportunity to build a more safe and inclusive and equitable experience for communities, and to understand where are communities, dropping out of our process when we look at how we hire today.
Absolutely. So I want to change gears for just a moment, and I want to talk a little bit about entrepreneurship. I know that you launched a technology company called Matheson. Can you tell us a little bit about it? And whenever we talk about small businesses, I love to just be honest, open, talking about some of the trials and tribulations along the way, because so often we, you're the CEO, you're in charge, it's great, it's all rainbows and butterflies, but until it's not, until you experience some of those challenges, and we want to certainly always educate our listeners about some of those occurrences. So tell us about the company and tell us what that experience has been.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you that, and I know you speak to so many entrepreneurs. It's such a double-edged sword, and I would say that the greatest blessing, and sometimes it feels like the greatest curse. There's nothing more exhilarating than starting your own, bringing your own idea to life, because you're solving a problem, hopefully that the world needs, and it's a true expression of your values in what you're creating every day. But the nature of doing something new, of bringing something new to life, means you're entering uncharted territory, right? You're following a path that potentially no one has been on yet. And by the nature of that, you'll likely face challenges. And so I'll tell you that this journey for me has been so rewarding, especially, I think thinking about how we make an impact, right? How we have a social mission that we are trying to live and practice every single day. But without a doubt, there are challenges. This space, the diversity, equity, inclusion technology space is extremely nascent and emerging. It's misunderstood by many employers that we sell to every day. There are times where we still enter conversations where where the topic feels optional and elective. We're entering potentially a recession and down economy. It'll be really interesting to see how many employers see DEI as their foundational necessity, and how many potentially see it as an elective procedure still, right? So I would say that there certainly have been challenges. I try to just stick back to the core why. Why did I get into this work? What sort of impact do I want to make? And I have to say, and I know you probably hear this all the time from folks you interview, the best part about entrepreneurship is you get to have a say in the people that you work with. And the way that I've addressed most challenges I've faced is surrounding myself with incredible people.
And that's awesome. That's great advice right there. Great advice. Surround yourself with incredible people and be very strategic about surrounding yourself with mentors, friends. You do need friends in the process in order to succeed in business. And it doesn't need to be all hard work. You can have a good time while doing it, but usually it's a good work hard, play hard sort of philosophy. So again, I'm chatting with Arthur Woods, who is a social entrepreneur, LGBTQ plus advocate. Again, as we've been saying, working that intersection of equity, inclusion, and technology. He is the author of Hiring for Diversity and co-founder of Matheson. We were just talking a little bit about the small business journey as well. We're going to have to squeeze in a break in just a minute, but Arthur, before we cut to that break, can you share your website and contact information?
Yes, so folks can learn about Matheson, our DEI technology platform at Matheson, Mathison.io, and about our book, Hiring for Diversity, at hiringfordiversity.com.
Awesome. Well, again, we're going to be continuing our conversation with Arthur Woods in just a moment. We're going to continue talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, certainly important topics on any week, but certainly very, very highlighted right now. And it's our pleasure to have Arthur on the program. But a shout out for our amazing friends and supporters of the program, and it's Tom Mirabali from healthplanchicago.com, healthplanchicago.com for all of your information on the Affordable Care Act health insurance needs. Check out his website, healthplanchicago.com. He responds to emails quite literally within a few hours, and he's always available for your personal needs, small business needs. You definitely would get in touch and mention that you heard about his services and get down to business. Again, a quick break. More conversation, diversity, equity, and inclusion when we return in just a moment and get down to business. Hey, welcome back to Get Down to Business, the show all about small business jobs and entrepreneurship. Check out my website, shalomklein.com. Follow me on Twitter at shalomklein. Lots of information, content relevant and timely, and that's exactly what this conversation is. I'm continuing our chat on the program with Arthur Woods, social entrepreneur, and the author of Hiring for Diversity and the co-founder of Matheson. Arthur, we talked in the beginning of our segment together a little bit about your background, but you are very modest, very humble, because you have worked with some very, very large companies, some of which rhyme with Oogle, and have worked on some very interesting projects. Can you tell us a little bit about how those experiences have shaped you into the passionate advocate that you are today?
Sure. Well, I think that one piece of advice I always give to entrepreneurs, who oftentimes feel that they'll be life entrepreneurs, is the more that we can diversify our experiences, do work in the corporate world, do work in the nonprofit world, try, if you have the opportunity to enter the public sector in some capacity, because you can apply this entrepreneurial spirit really in any industry, in any function, right? So I was blessed early in my career to have a stint at Google. It was in the early days. Google had acquired YouTube, and I was in the early days of helping build YouTube's education division. And so it was almost a startup within YouTube, but our mission was to help democratize YouTube's educational content so anyone around the world could learn anything. And I have to tell you, it was a wonderful experience, partly because I had a chance to see this sort of critical role that learning can play, through technology, and that largely has inspired a lot of what we've been able to do with the companies that I've started.
So great background over there. So as you have continued your journey and passion in this diversity hiring efforts, you have learned some things along the way. You were the creator of the first Equal Hiring Index to assess and benchmark inclusive hiring practices. How did that come to be, and why does it matter to our small business listeners?
Yeah, so one of the things that we found in our work early on was that employers are oftentimes anchoring to only one metric, and that is the metric of, do I see what appear to be underrepresented or diverse faces in the room? But as we stepped back, we realized, employers, in order to achieve a greater diverse representation on their teams, they have to create equitable systems, and they have to create inclusive cultures where people thrive and advance and actually feel a sense of belonging. And we found that most employers were really poorly equipped to gauge the state of their organizations through the equity and inclusion lens. So we created a framework, an assessment system that we call our Equity Index, and it enables employers to actually gauge the accessibility, the current, consistency, and basically inclusive nature of their existing talent processes and systems. So it gives them this sort of equity scorecard. And it's given employers the ability to really quickly and efficiently assess their gaps and figure out, if we really are trying to create an equitable experience for every candidate that we hire and employee that we bring into the organization, how can we do that quickly? And so it's given employers this really great analytics software.
Definitely. And, it's all about, as you said, surrounding yourself with good people when it's in business, but also surrounding yourself and learning from other companies' best practices, tools. Some of them are free, some of them are going to cost. But what are some of those helpful tools, free and paid, and strategies that HR teams can use to make better hiring decisions?
Well, the first thing we talk about is the fact that one of the most critical functions for building an equitable, inclusive workplace that most impacts DEI is having a channel for your team members to give feedback. And ideally, that's anonymous, but we highly recommend if a company isn't already doing it, have some consistent way of surveying and polling their team and collecting this feedback, and making that something that's outside of just the performance cycle, because oftentimes that's the only time we hear from someone. And it's the time that they're getting promoted or they're potentially getting a raise, right? Or not. So we really want to create an active conversation with their teams throughout the year that's giving people a safe mechanism to share their input and their insights. From there, we highly recommend that employers think about ways that they're just investing in the leadership development of their teams, and specifically their frontline managers. There is, the role of a manager has become so much more complex, managing remote teams, many of whom have never met each other in person. And we oftentimes find that leadership development, especially for early stage companies, is skipped for these frontline managers who sometimes it's their first time managing teams, and especially managing in this complex environment. So we highly recommend that folks utilize any kind of leadership development or manager development experiences for their teams early on in their journey.
That's great. And that's some good tips, again, for big companies, small companies. But I know that the pain point for small businesses, for entrepreneurs, is real. And so that's some really, really good advice. But going back to, your area of passion, area of focus over at Matheson, I know you're constantly working and advocating for HR teams to have the tools so they can be less biased when we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And again, I know you are right there at that intersection with technology. Right. So how can our small business owners that might have a small team, maybe they've got their one HR person, how can that HR team improve their job descriptions to be less biased?
It's a great question. Well, the first thing I would just say is that, we talk to so many small business owners, so many early stage entrepreneurs who feel they're at this dilemma as though they have to choose between, do I build an equitable, diverse business, or do I not? And the real question is, do I have the time and do I have the actual financial capital to do this? And we always say it only gets harder the more that you grow. So taking these intentional measures early on and embedding this work into your DNA makes it so it's really embedded and sustainable as you do grow. So one of the first things that we can do as we're thinking about our job descriptions and our role requirements is to think about the fact that we typically, when we're first scoping a job, one of the first things that we typically do as small business owners is we go and try to find a template of that job description, because we try to be efficient. We try to not have to reinvent the wheel. And so we'll go Google the job description, we'll look at it quickly, and then we'll just throw it in there. And most of the time, the templates that we find online have exorbitant credentials and requirements, many of which actually restrict our pool of potential underrepresented candidates to something very homogenous. So many folks still require, advanced degrees, specific industry experience, and they don't acknowledge that, an underrepresented job seeker might have all the right transferable skills, but might not show up with the same credentials as someone else. So we tell entrepreneurs and small business owners, take the time to think about what is absolutely essential for this role and cut out the non-essential requirements, the preferred qualifications. Because the more that you do that, you're actually casting a wider net. We recommend, we have a bias scanner for job descriptions that, enables you to analyze your text for exclusionary terms. We really recommend trying to, think about, the most neutral, simple, accessible language. Stay away from gender-coded terms like aggressively, and think about the language that we're using that might be off-putting for some job seekers. If you have a term, an acronym that you use internal to the organization that a job seeker outside of the industry might not know right away, clarify it, right? The more that we're making our language accessible, it's actually enabling other folks to apply.
That's great advice right there. Again, I'm chatting with Arthur Woods, who is the best-selling author of Hiring for Diversity. So, Arthur, I have to ask as we come to a conclusion in our conversation, you're a man of action. I could tell that already, whether it's in business, your advocacy. Writing a book is a lot of work. It requires a lot of research, and this book is a really good one. So why did you spend all that time writing a full book on diversity hiring?
Well, I'll tell you, part of it came out of the pandemic. We realized that, wow, we have a lot of leisure time that's going unallocated now that we're not seeing people in person. So it was a pandemic project. But honestly, I found myself repeating a lot of the same emails and Google Docs and articles to people. And at the point that I was asked probably, the same 20 questions across the period of a month, I said, this has reached the critical point of needing a book, to help folks navigate what is a very complex and challenging body of work. And it's given us the ability to put it all into one place.
Well, let's get people over to purchase the book and get in touch with you and your team at Matheson. How can people reach you, Arthur? Yes,
so you can follow me on LinkedIn at Arthur Woods. Again, you can reach us at matheson.io, mathison.io, and hiringfordiversity.com. And we have ongoing events and free resources on our website that folks can download and access to really advance this work.
Awesome. Well, Arthur Woods, I really have enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to having you back on real soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. We'll be right back on the show all about small business jobs and entrepreneurship after these quick headlines.